Well, there's a lot of interest in the energy transition. And in our report, we don't really focus on that. We assume that it basically is going to happen. But most of the focus from a research point of view has been on, are there enough materials in the world to be able to have the transition because of the need for critical minerals and various other minerals. But nobody's really looked at how you get the ore from the mine to the coast, across the coast to a refiner, and the refined product to a manufacturer to make all the products and equipment that's needed in the energy transition. Shipbuilding has struggled in the last basic decade, and it has capacity to build ships has declined on a worldwide basis. The other trend that's very important is that it is now basically a captured industry in a couple of countries, primarily Asia. So you're talking China, Korea, Japan are the major shipbuilders, building anywhere from 90 to 98% of the ships. So we've got an issue with the capacity of the global shipping industry to build ships, and it's been shrinking. And this is going to be, the black hole as we describe it in the meeting the energy transition objective. The latest data shows that actually last year, 2024, 86% of the orders for new ships were taken by Chinese shipyards. For the last decade, they have built, over half of the ships that have been delivered. The remaining share into the 90s has basically been Japan and South Korea. And our problem is that we deliver for ocean going, not coastal, but ocean going ships, we deliver basically 0.1% of all the tonnage that's being built in the world. So we're talking about building ocean going U.S. ships, U.S. flagged ships that represent essentially a single digit number of ships in a year. Ships are basically something that most people are very unfamiliar with. This is one of the challenges of the global maritime trade industry is people never see the ships except when they're loading and unloading, which means they're in a port. What's happened over the history of the industry, really since World War II, is we have developed the ability to build a lot of specialized ships to handle the particular cargoes. And by that, I mean whether it's grains, whether it's ores, whether it's cattle, whether it's, other things, all kinds of equipment, etc., is carried on these ships. And we have an array of types of ships and sizes of ships because you can't take the very big ships like oil tankers, huge oil tankers, very large crude carriers as they're called, into a lot of ports in the world. So there are a lot of things, a lot of routes that dictate what type of cargo ship can actually meet the demand to move whatever materials have to be moved. The challenge is matching water depth in ports cargo capacity. In other words, having the dock space to bring a ship in and dock it because you have to load it. And if you're loading ore, you're loading it basically with, conveyor belts and things like that. If you're loading containers, you need big cranes. Um, these are all the demands that will dictate, or the constraints that dictate what types of ships, what sizes of ships can actually service a particular port. And the energy transition that's being talked about envisions finding new mines in new places around the world, which will mean new ports being developed, and that will dictate new trade routes and what types of vessels are going to be needed. So it's impossible at this point in time to say exactly how many ships are going to be needed or exactly what types of ships are going to be needed in the future. But what we can look at is the demand in terms of tonnage, which tells you how many, in a broad sense, how many ships are going to be needed. And it's a huge number. The conflict between the US and China over trade rests on really the future of what kind of goods and services we're going to have in our economy and what role China will play in that. They at the moment dominate the critical minerals and a lot of other ores, but they also dominate the refining of those. In fact, they have a greater domination of refining capacity than they do mining capacity. So that becomes a bottleneck on a global basis for anybody who is not able to compete in that nature. What that means is that we, the US, will have to look to developing more of our own internal capacity, whether it means building mines or building refineries, or making agreements with strong allies around the world that we can develop a competing refining capacity to China so that they do not have the chokehold on our future in terms of critical minerals and other important minerals that are needed for not just the energy transition, but for global growth. The push for cleaner fuels in the maritime trade means that the industry is going to have to figure out what systems they can use to power ships, what clean fuels they can use, whether the fuels will be readily available, and what the operating performance of these new powering systems and new fuel systems are. We're likely to see higher costs for shipbuilding initially. We may see higher operating costs. We may see a shorter life for some of the components in the powering systems. All of these will basically knock on each other and lead to challenges in meeting global shipping needs in the future. The biggest myth that people have about global shipping for the energy transition is that ships will be readily available when they're needed and that they can handle the volume increases and the new trade routes. So we're talking about potentially recreating, this industry. But that's something that most analysts, don't pay attention to. Listening to President Trump talk about building ships, beautiful ships, and lots of ships, um, he's basically endorsing the Ships Act, which was introduced the middle of December, um, which is designed to promote the restoration of an American shipbuilding industry and an American maritime industry, which means we get the workers, we train the workers to be able to build the ships, but also that we create a maritime labor pool to crew the ships, because that's another requirement. The idea is that if we don't restore our shipbuilding capacity, not only does it hurt us from a commercial shipping point of view, but it hurts us potentially from a national security point of view. We will not have the capacity if we need to build a lot of naval ships for whatever reason in a very short period of time. So this is, a double-edged sword in terms of helping grow the U.S., but also keep us safe.